I want to address two other words that Jewish people love to overuse that have absolutely no meaning to them at all. Never again. Well, I want to say first and foremost that it never happened in the first place, at least not how we've been told that things occurred. This Nazi movement that they want to cry and complain about, that they say is resurfacing, a new Nazi movement, a new white supremacist hatred and anti-Semitism and so on and so forth, you have to realize that there's people of all races and all nationalities that are coming to realize these things and that are speaking up against Jewish supremacy and Jewish dominance, against the Jewish power structure, essentially. So to call it a Nazi movement is just a flat-out lie, and there's a lot of negative connotations and associations that go along with these words. So that's why they use that and overuse that so often. Never again, anti-Semitism. Let's talk about the original Nazi movement. Well, that was a defensive movement. That was a group of people that were being squeezed. The life was being squeezed out of them. Most German people, the majority of the population, would have starved had they not fought back against the Jews, the international Jews, that was squeezing the life out of Germany. They're essentially planning to starve them to death. And they were using them. And first and foremost, you have to realize something here. If a group of people are using you, lying to you, robbing you, and actually murdering your people, then you have the right to stand up for yourselves. Especially if you allow this group of people into your nation out of the goodness of your heart. That foolishness. Right? If you made room for them, allow them to come in, and then they do this and they stab you in the back for doing that. And that's essentially what's taken place. And this has happened time and time again throughout history. Unless you, of course, believe that Jews have been kicked out of countless countries for no doing of their own. And the only history that keeps repeating itself is that we keep allowing them to do the same things over and over and over again. They view us as being cattle, as being shit on their shoes, essentially. We have no value. Our lives mean nothing to them. So to rob us and to steal from us, that means nothing. But to poison us, to send us off to fight and die over their greed, they do so without batting an eye. It means nothing to them. So like I said, this original Nazi movement was a defensive one. And people need to pay attention here. When the first Great Depression took place, everyone in this country was pissed off and angry at the bankers. When people like Machine Gun Kelly and all these other people were robbing banks, the general population was applauding them. They actually gave them safe haven in some areas of the country just because they were angry at these bankers. And the problem with that is this. Most of them didn't realize that these bankers were Jews. They didn't make that connection to say, well, you know, we're pissed off at these bankers, but let's see who they are at the highest levels. Who's really controlling the financial institutions and the financial systems and the banks, so on and so forth. They didn't make these connections. So just having a conversation with my wife tonight, she's telling me, you know, Scott, you're well spoken and you need to get this message out, maybe even make flyers. And we were specifically talking about the Dugway Proving Grounds, which is here in Utah, and that's where the United States stores its chemical and biological weapons. So she was just making a point that the average person here needs to be aware that this place exists and the things that they've done, to include releasing chemical and biological weapons into populated areas and into the natural wildlife with direct intent. I mean, they did this on purpose. It wasn't done accidentally. They've used us essentially as guinea pigs. And then they turn around and they accuse Saddam Hussein of chemical weapons and so on and so forth. Obviously, we once upon a time backed Saddam Hussein. Now all of a sudden, when it served our interest, and I don't say our interest, I mean the Jewish interest, to oust him, then all of a sudden they started talking about how evil and hateful he was. It's a whole other subject, but the point is, it's very hypocritical because they've done the same thing here to their own people, but they don't even let them know. So most Americans are unaware that we've been pretty much treated as guinea pigs. Anyhow, she was telling me that I need to get this message out, and the one thing that I told her is I refuse to just tell people about a specific incident without pointing out who's to blame. Because if I were to go out and get everyone in the country, let alone let's just say in my area or in the state of Utah, aware of this place and the things that they've done, it does us no good if we don't point the fingers at the right people. If we just say, well, this general that was in charge, he did it and he was the one that was in charge, so let's fault him and hold him accountable, or these scientists or whatever else. We need to know who was above them, giving them the orders. Who's really controlling the government? Who's really giving the final word and wanting these experiments to have taken place in the first place. And without doing that, we're wasting our time. It's the same way of blaming George Bush for problems and saying, well, it's the Republicans or it's the Democrats, as if when that changes, that everything's going to be okay. We're dealing with the employees, not the employer themselves, the people at the very top. And without pointing a finger at them, absolutely nothing will ever change. So at any and all costs, we have to always point that out. And she's like, well, most people aren't going to be able to handle that much truth. They're just not going to be able to swallow that. And, well, the fact of the matter is, she's right. Most people will avoid the truth. Even if you tell them, hey, they're fucking poisoning your family, they're still going to turn their head and go about their business. And, that's most people, but I don't care. I'm not most people. I have to tell it like it is no matter what. And these people have to at least hear the truth. Then they can decide for themselves. But at the same time, to go further into our conversation, she's suggesting that, well, at least at that point, then people can contact their congressmen, so on and so forth, and we can try and get rid of the Federal Reserve. That we could then get like the Dugway Proving Grounds under check and keep them from further poisoning and killing us, right? But my only reply to that is there is no political solution. We can't hope to have a political solution in a system that serves this group of people. I mean, here we are at the bottom, way at the bottom. The system is controlling us, right? It's weighing down on us. And then these people are on top, pushing that down on us. So what good does it do for us to play their game by their rules, to try and come up with a political solution? And these little changes in their system, the whole system has to be turned over upside down, and the people behind it need to be exposed. And without that, there will absolutely, positively be no hope for any positive change. Things will only get worse. As we hold a particular puppet accountable, let's just say we got George Bush and accuse him of all these crimes and put it all on him. Everything that's happened over the past 8 years, we just put it all on him. What does that solve? He really wasn't the one who was doing these things. He's not the mastermind. He is nothing but a puppet, just like all the puppets that came before him. So unless we deal with the problem directly with the people who are directly responsible at the very top, that if they were not giving these orders, if they were not financially backing these things and paying people off and controlling these things in the manner in which they do, then these things wouldn't be happening. Nothing happens without their green light, without them giving the order. So essentially, to hold people that are taking these orders accountable is a waste of time. That's like, an Iraqi blaming this private that's in Iraq. He's just there doing his duty, right? He's doing what he's told, and then killing him, or killing 10 privates, 10 sergeants, 10 lieutenants, or even 10 generals in essence. I mean, what good does that do? There'll be 10 privates, 10 sergeants, 10 lieutenants, 10 generals even, to replace the ones that they killed, and nothing will change. Their country will still be occupied, and nothing's going to change. And it's the same thing here. If we deal with these privates, these lieutenants, the private, let's just say that's a police officer, right? He doesn't know any better. He's just doing his job. He's working for the system. More specifically for the federal government. Let's say an FBI agent, right? Then you have, the politicians who might be considered officers or generals specifically in the army, in the military here at home, or the president himself. What good will it do to hold them accountable? They will just put someone else in their place. So no, there's no political solution. And then she goes on to ask me, well, then what's going to happen? Is there a peaceful solution? And my answer to that is, well, that's if everyone was made aware. If everyone was aware of what they're doing, they would be out of business. They have to stop or else. But the fact of the matter is they know that. They know that there's like a critical limit of people that can be onto them. If a certain amount of people are onto them, then they're fucked. And they know that. In the same way that happened during the Great Depression, when people are starting to be aware, there was actually a Nazi movement, or an anti-Jewish movement is what I would rather call it, taking place in the United States before World War II as well. But then suddenly they provide us with these false enemies, these evil Germans and the evil Japanese, and now our focus is no longer on the people that it should be on. Now we have these false enemies, enemies that would not be our enemies other than if they made it that way. And that's what takes place every time. So right now they might provide a false enemy, whether that's the Iranians or, as I've suggested, having Obama assassinated and having black people pissed off at whites and having us going at each other's throats. But nonetheless, they will some way, somehow sidetrack us and keep us from looking any further into these facts. And the number one thing that they need to do is to get rid of the internet, or to gain control over it. And that's why you see these things like the Jewish Internet Defense Force, the ADL, these politicians at the highest levels wanting to stop this internet anti-Semitism and all this internet hate, and they'll say terrorist. Well, I'm not a fucking terrorist. I've never suggested taking arms up or doing this, doing that, or the other. I'm just pointing out facts and saying, hey, we need to do something. No doubt about that. But how could anyone label me as being a fucking terrorist? Or anyone else that's speaking about the atrocities in which they are carrying out against us all. We're just pointing out what they're doing. But, as I said, that's what they do. They apply these false labels and these word associations and these heavy meanings that are behind these words so that we're silenced, effectively silenced. So the average person will not listen to us, but more and more people are doing that. Let's say 1 out of 100 people that I reach actually opens their mind up and they look into these things and they find out the truth. Then that person reaches out, so on and so forth. Eventually it's a snowball that will cause their demise. They know this. So something drastic will happen. There's absolutely, positively no doubt in my mind. It's not some paranoid thoughts or delusional ideas or whatever else, and that's going to lead me into my next video. So